Ever wonder why she lost interest even though you did everything right? You gave your time, your attention, your energy, and she still drifted. This isn't a mystery, it's a pattern. And today, we're breaking that pattern forever. This message isn't just for your ears. It's for your dignity, your future. Men everywhere are walking around confused, disrespected, emotionally drained. Not because women are complicated, but because they've been lied to about what it means to be valuable. Right now, if you feel like you've been giving everything and still feel invisible, you're not alone. You're not broken. You're just missing the code. What I'm about to tell you will change everything. Not just in your love life, but in how every person sees and treats you. I created the most powerful guide ever written for men, the Stoic Relationship Blueprint for Men. Backed by 2,000+ years of unshakable wisdom and brutal truth. This ebook is available now, but not for long. Click the link in the comments to grab it immediately. Now, let's get into the 4 things that kill your value in front of a woman, and what you must do to never be overlooked again. Number 1. Playing the nice guy. The worst part about playing the nice guy isn't that it doesn't work. It's that it works just enough to fool you into thinking it will eventually pay off. And that illusion is what traps so many men in quiet misery for years, even decades, convincing themselves that if they just stay patient, if they keep being accommodating, if they continue to swallow every ounce of frustration and doubt while nodding along to whatever is expected of them, that maybe, just maybe, she'll notice one day and finally return the devotion with equal desire. But she never does, not because she's cruel or shallow, but because she's wired to seek certainty and strength, and niceness without backbone is uncertainty disguised as virtue. A soft mask worn by men too afraid to stand in full truth, too afraid to lose what little connection they have, and so they become the emotional doormat, the ever-available standby, the sweet soul she can text at 2 a.m. when the man who actually excites her doesn't show up. And in that moment of use, you feel needed, and that fleeting need feeds the illusion that your approach is noble, but what you've built is not love. It's dependency built on emotional bribery, and the reason it breaks you isn't because you were rejected, but because deep down you know it wasn't real, that every yes you gave against your better judgment, every laugh at jokes you didn't find funny, every compliment you offered to avoid awkwardness, was not kindness but fear disguised as manners, and that fear whispers louder every time you watch her light up for the man who's nothing like you, the one who doesn't filter every word, the one who can walk away, the one who makes her feel something real. And as painful as it is, you have to face that you weren't loving her purely. You were loving her in hopes that it would buy you belonging, and that hope has made you small, reactive, needy, unable to be direct or decisive. And that's what eroded your presence. Not because you weren't good enough, but because you gave your worth away piecemeal, trying to earn what should have been mutual from the start. And every time you held your tongue when something crossed the line, every time you reshaped yourself into what you thought she wanted, every time you stood there silently swallowing disappointment instead of speaking what burned inside you, you trained both her and yourself to believe you didn't deserve more. And now you sit there confused, angry, broken-hearted, wondering why doing everything right still led to rejection. But you weren't rejected for being good. You were rejected for being forgettable, because niceness without depth, without strength, without the courage to lose, is not memorable. It's emotionally flat. It's invisible in a world where women are starving for men who can be kind without being weak, who can be tender without being afraid to lead. And this is where your shift must begin. Not in pretending to be alpha, not in mimicking swagger, but in rebuilding yourself around truth so sharp it cannot be compromised, where you stop seeking to be liked and instead become the kind of man who can say exactly what he wants, what he won't tolerate, what he expects from love and life and people around him, and who can let go of the need to be accepted for the deeper, far more powerful experience of being respected, not because you demand it, but because you finally decided to give it to yourself first. Number 2, weak boundaries. It's one of the most painful truths for a man to accept that the people around him, including the women he dates, treat him exactly how he's taught them to, not based on who he really is, but on what he allows without protest, on what he quietly endures in the name of peace. And over time, that endurance, that slow sacrifice of your instincts, becomes your cage, because what begins as flexibility quickly mutates into self-erasure. And every time you bite your tongue when disrespected, every time you let a friend joke too far, every time you rationalize flaky behavior, broken promises, or lack of effort from anyone close to you, especially her, what you're really doing is sending out a signal that says, I won't fight for myself. And that signal doesn't make people like you more. It makes them see you as dispensable, someone they can dismiss without consequence. And while you might think you're being mature or non-confrontational, what's actually happening is the erosion of your identity, and she sees it clearer than you do. Because women are masters at sensing inconsistency in men. They may not articulate it, but they feel when your energy shifts from grounded to compromised, when your yes means nothing because it's always yes, when your no is just a delayed yes waiting for her reaction. And once she realizes that you can be pushed, guilted, manipulated, or talked out of your own values, it's over. Not instantly, but slowly and irreversibly, because what began as interest turns into disdain. And it doesn't matter how kind or thoughtful you are if your foundation is weak, because no one can feel safe with someone who won't protect themselves. And the worst part is that it doesn't always come from cowardice. Sometimes it comes from conditioning, from years of being taught to be agreeable, to never offend, to keep things calm and polite. But what that creates is a man who's easy to talk over, easy to interrupt, easy to overlook. A man who slowly gets used to making himself small just to avoid rocking the boat. And the longer you live that way, the more your inner world screams at you with anxiety and confusion, because deep down you know something is wrong. You weren't born passive. You were trained into it, trained to be overly understanding even when you're being taken advantage of, trained to avoid standing tall in case someone walks away. And what you don't realize is that every person who stays because you bend isn't really choosing you. They're choosing the version of you that's easiest for them to use. And eventually, your resentment will rise, not just towards them, but towards yourself, because you'll start noticing how drained you are after every interaction, how you feel invisible even when surrounded by people, how your relationships feel like obligations instead of connections, and you'll start blaming them. But the truth is that they're just following the rules you taught them. Rules like, I'll always say yes, or you can disrespect me without apology, or I'll tolerate anything to keep you around. And the only way to change the game is to rewrite those rules completely, not by yelling or demanding attention, but by becoming the kind of man whose presence commands respect without needing to ask for it, by learning to say no with calm confidence, to walk away from things that deplete your peace, to stop explaining your worth and start embodying it. Because boundaries aren't walls to keep people out. They're standards that decide who gets to stay. And without them, your relationships will always be fragile, conditional, and one-sided, because you'll be showing up in pieces, hoping someone else will make you whole. But no one can do that for you. And if you don't choose to protect your time, your energy, your emotional world, you will find yourself surrounded by people who do not value you. Not because you are not valuable, but because you made it too easy for them to ignore the cost of access. And when something costs nothing, it is treated like nothing. So if you want to be seen, if you want to be felt, if you want your presence to mean something, you have to stop proving you're good enough and start showing what it looks like to be a man who no longer compromises his soul for approval, who no longer fears being alone more than he fears being used, who no longer smiles through treatment that bruises his integrity, because that man, the one who is willing to walk alone rather than walk in betrayal of himself, that man is unforgettable, not because he's loud, but because he is no longer afraid to protect the life he's building. And once you become that man, you'll stop chasing respect and start attracting it, not from everyone, but from those who recognize the strength it takes to finally say, "This is where I stand, and I'm not moving." Number 3, emotional overexposure. There's a part of you that wants to be understood so badly, that aches to be fully seen, fully known, fully accepted by someone who looks into you and says, "I see everything, and I'm staying." And that desire isn't weakness in itself, it's human. But what you were never taught is that chasing that depth through emotional overexposure too early, too frequently, and too indiscriminately is not only ineffective, it's destructive. Because what you're doing, often without realizing it, is flooding the connection before it's even had a chance to solidify. And instead of building intimacy, you start suffocating it, not out of bad intent, but because you were never shown the difference between emotional connection and emotional dumping. And the truth is that many men today confuse openness with strategy. They think that if they just unload their pain fast enough, if they bleed out their history, their heartbreaks, their trauma, and longing in the first few conversations, that they'll be seen as deep, as different, as more deserving. But what it actually signals is desperation. And desperation doesn't connect, it repels. Not because women are cold or unsympathetic, but because the energy behind that level of exposure so early in a relationship feels like a plea for safety, not a shared vulnerability. And when you do that, you don't create trust, you create weight. And while you're trying to connect, what she feels is pressure, emotional responsibility, an unearned intimacy that now demands her to carry something you haven't even processed yourself. And she didn't sign up to rescue someone from the wreckage of their past. And that might sting to hear, but it's necessary because you've been taught to believe that being vulnerable equals being loved. But vulnerability isn't valuable if it's indiscriminate. It's not strength if it's scattered. It's not connection if it's used to fast-track affection. And while you think you're sharing your soul, what she sees is a man who hasn't yet learned to hold himself. And that is terrifying, not because she's heartless, but because it tells her one thing: that if she falls apart, you won't be able to stand for either of you. And that knowledge kills attraction, not because of what you felt or survived, but because of how you framed it. Because being emotionally present is not the same as being emotionally exposed. And when you give her access to every corner of your emotional life before she's earned that place, before you've seen if she can even hold space without judgment or control, what you're really doing is gambling with your soul in hopes that her acceptance will finally validate your pain. But no woman, no matter how caring, no matter how strong, can heal a man who keeps handing out his broken pieces as invitations to be loved. Because real love doesn't bloom under emotional pressure, it blooms under emotional integrity. And that means learning to process before you pour, learning to self-soothe before you seek support, learning to feel deeply without leaking it all over someone else. And you might think that's cold, but it's the opposite. It's power, it's mastery, it's leadership. And every man who learns this becomes emotionally magnetic because he is not reactive, not overflowing, not flailing for validation. He is grounded. And from that grounded place, when he does choose to share, slowly, deliberately, intentionally, it hits differently. It lands as truth, not noise. And that's what women crave more than anything. Not endless access to your past pain, but presence, control, ownership, the ability to hold tension without crumbling, to express without overreaching, to speak emotion without needing to be rescued. And when you learn to do that, you stop trying to prove that you're deep, and you become deep by nature. You stop trying to earn love through exposure, and instead cultivate love through discernment, because not everyone deserves to know your wounds. Not everyone can carry your truths. And the more you expose without filters or boundaries, the more you dilute the sacredness of your experience. And eventually, you'll wake up exhausted, resentful, disconnected, wondering why your openness never seems to build closeness. And it's because you gave away access without investment, handed over pages of your story before anyone showed they could read, without rewriting the ending. And the most tragic part is that in trying so hard to be loved, you made yourself unlovable, not for your pain, but for how recklessly you kept placing it in the hands of others, hoping they'd give you something you were never taught to give yourself: emotional security, emotional ownership, emotional dignity. And until you reclaim that, until you learn to sit with your feelings without offloading them, at the first sign of connection, until you realize that self-expression isn't the same as self-respect, you will keep attracting women who feel overwhelmed, disconnected, unsure, and eventually gone, not because you were too much, but because you were never taught how to be just enough in your expression, to intrigue, to invite, to connect without collapsing. And that skill, that control, that maturity, it doesn't come from avoiding emotion. It comes from refining how you share it, who you share it with, and why. And when you master that, when you learn to carry your emotional weight with intention, with strength, with clarity, you stop seeking love and you start creating it. Number 4, lacking purpose. There's a quiet misery that creeps into a man's life when he wakes up each day with no direction, no structure, no pursuit that stretches him beyond survival. And it's not loud. It doesn't scream or announce itself. It simply shows up in everything he does, in how long he sleeps, in how often he scrolls, in how he starts things and never finishes, in how quickly he abandons difficult goals and replaces them with cheap pleasures. And the tragedy isn't just that he's wasting time, it's that he's slowly forgetting who he is. Because when a man lives without purpose, he doesn't just lose drive, he loses identity. And the more time he spends floating through distraction and entertainment and obligations he never questioned, the more disconnected he becomes from the core of his own masculinity. Because at the center of every man's being is the primal need to chase something that demands more from him than comfort ever will. To wake up every day knowing that his existence has weight and consequence. And without that, his energy collapses, his relationships fracture, his spirit dulls. And no matter how much love or approval he gets from others, it all feels empty, because deep down he knows he's playing small, knows he's hiding, knows he's tolerating a version of life that he would be ashamed to show to his younger self. And what no one tells him is that this is not just bad for his soul. It's devastating to every relationship he touches, especially with women, because women don't need you to be perfect, rich, or wildly successful, but they do need to feel like you are becoming something, like you are building toward a life that isn't dictated by other people's opinions or temporary pleasure or avoiding pain. And when you don't have that, when you don't have a mission that's bigger than you, your connection with her becomes everything. Not because it's love, but because it's the only place you feel needed. And the second that dynamic is in place, she can feel it. She can feel that she's your only anchor, your only direction, your only reason to try. And that burden isn't romantic, it's exhausting. And while you think you're showing love, what she sees is a man who's not grounded in anything outside of her. And that's when she starts to pull away. Not because you're not enough, but because your life isn't enough without her. And that makes her feel trapped, because she doesn't want to be your reason for waking up. She wants to wake up next to a man who already has one. a man who would still be moving forward whether she's in the picture or not, a man whose path isn't based on emotional codependence, but on vision, clarity, and internal fire. The kind of man who is never lost for long because he has somewhere to go. And that doesn't mean you need to know exactly what your calling is right now, but it does mean you need to be in pursuit, in motion, in growth. And if you're waiting for motivation to strike before you act, you've already lost, because purpose isn't found. It's forged, it's chosen, it's earned through movement, commitment, trial, failure, and correction. And if your days are just passing by with no rhythm, no structure, no hunger to create or contribute or conquer something worthwhile, then your self-worth will continue to deteriorate, no matter how many affirmations you say or how much validation you seek, because men don't build confidence from comfort. They build it from results, from momentum, from fighting for something that doesn't hand itself over easily. And if you've been feeling numb, directionless, tired for no reason, chances are you're not depressed. You're just disconnected from your essence. And the way back is not through endless introspection or waiting to be rescued. It's through action, raw, uncomfortable, sometimes blind action towards something that forces you to get better, forces you to learn, forces you to level up. And when you do that, everything changes. Not instantly, not dramatically at first, but slowly and unmistakably. Your eyes change, your posture shifts, your speech becomes more deliberate, your presence becomes heavier. Because now you are not just existing, you are moving with weight, and people feel that. Women feel that, and they start reacting to you differently. Not because you're trying to impress them, but because you are finally impressing yourself. And that quiet pride, that knowing, that I'm on my way energy, is magnetic in a way that no tactics or games or external status ever could be. Because it's rooted in something real, something earned. And that's the man who no longer needs to chase anything, because he knows that everything worth having will eventually cross paths with his purpose if he stays the course. And yes, the world is loud and distractions are endless, and it's tempting to settle into habits and routines that numb the ache of unfulfilled potential. But if you want to sleep at night with peace, if you want to walk into rooms with unshakable self-respect, if you want to look her in the eyes and know that whether she stays or not, you are still rising, then you must, with every part of you, decide today that you will no longer live without direction, that you will stop building a life that only looks good from the outside, but feels empty when you're alone, and that you will commit fully and completely to finding the thing that makes your blood move again, to building the structure that makes your time valuable again, to choosing the kind of man you want to be remembered as, and aligning every single day with that man's actions. Because in the end, it's not what you hoped for, or what you meant to do, or what you could have done that defines you. It's what you built when no one believed in you. It's the path you walked when no one was watching, and it's the purpose you chose when you could have stayed hidden. And if you're still breathing, still standing, still reading this, it means it's not too late. It means your direction is still yours to decide. And the only question left is, will you keep drifting, or will you rise and become unignorable? If any part of this spoke to your life, your relationships, your regrets, then you already know what you need to do. This wasn't about theory. This was about waking up. So now ask yourself, will you keep living like this, watching the same patterns repeat in your life, losing respect from women, wasting time trying to fix things from a place of weakness? Or will you finally become the man who doesn't need to be chosen, because he already chose himself? If you want to stop guessing and start living with clarity, strength, and real direction, then you need the Stoic Relationship Blueprint for Men, the only book designed to reshape how men think, act, lead, and attract with timeless power, rooted in 2,000+ years of wisdom. This is a complete transformation of how you carry yourself in every area of your life, from dating to discipline, from purpose to presence. And we're capping the number of sales to preserve this knowledge from being watered down, because truth is only powerful when it's protected and used by the few who are ready. How much longer are you willing to live on the sidelines of your own life? How many more relationships do you want to lose before something changes? What would it feel like to finally walk with authority and know no one can shake it? The link is in the comments. Claim the blueprint now before it disappears. Like, share, and subscribe to the channel right now so we can keep creating real tools for men who are done being confused and ready to lead.